Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies. Tonight we are glad to start off episode 16 strong with some addiction themed stories. We're going to be comparing Let's Get Invisible from Goosebumps, and we're going to be facing it off against an iconic Haunting Hour story, but it was also based from a Neil Shusterman short story from a collection called Darkness Creeping, known as Catching Cold. So we have a lot to go over tonight because there's a book, short story, and then both have episodes. And then we have discussion at the end. So sadly tonight we were not fortunate enough to have Bruce on nor Spongy, but we will be reading their thoughts out loud. But we are joined with the normal panelists as usual. We have BD Horror. How you doing tonight, BD Horror, who now goes by the Horror Tavern?
Yo, 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 people of the night, it's your boy Beatty. I'm the host of the Horror Tavern. And much like my friend Rowley, aka Robert Catman, from Haunting Hour, he's catching cold, and I'm catching over a cold. I've been sick for quite a while. So if I do cough during this recording, forgive me. But I'm really, really excited because after watching some new things and rewatching some stuff and reading some new stuff for this episode, I think it's gonna be fun. I think this is genuinely probably gonna be one of my favorite episodes we do on here. So hope you guys are excited.
All right. All right. I'm excited too. I've been wanting to talk about one of these stories for a while. We're joined by Alejandra. How you doing tonight, Goosebumps for Dummies?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very glad to be back here once again talking to all of you. And I'm quite excited for this one because actually I'm a big fan of most of these here. Only one of them I think is actually pretty mediocre. Three of these that we're talking about today is actually really good, and I think this is going to be a close one for me.
All right. Yeah. I love it when we get close because the discussions normally are so push and pull and it's hard to decide. I don't know why I like that, but I just do. And of course, we're joined by Ultimate Goosebumps Man as well. How you doing tonight, Micah?
Doing pretty good. Just started my first week at a new job, so that's kind of nice getting my summer job going. Other than that, pretty much it.
All right. So I guess we're ready to talk about some addiction themed horror. And we're going to start off with a very classic Goosebumps book, one of the first 10, actually. Let's Get Invisible. Micah, why don't you tell us about Let's Get Invisible's book?
So Let's Get Invisible is basically the story about a kid named Max and him along with his brother Noah and his friends Zach, Aaron, April. I'm really bad at these names, but I got the basic gist of them. Basically, the day of Max's birthday, they go up to this attic to hang out in at Max's house and end up discovering a hidden room with a mirror inside of it. And eventually they find out that when you pull this light cord and the light turns on, this mirror has the ability to turn you invisible. And so these kids are having fun playing around with this ability, but things start getting sinister. The more they turn invisible, it takes them longer to start coming back. They feel themselves being like pulled towards the mirror almost. And while it's weirding them out, they still get this almost rush out of becoming invisible and start, making a game out of it, all these different competitions. And Max is getting really freaked out, but none of his friends really seem to bother except for, I believe, April is the only one that's really hesitant about this whole situation. And something goes very wrong, and they realize the horrifying truth of what this mirror is. And yeah, it's pretty much the basic plot overview of it. I think this book is pretty decent. It's Again, it's an okay one. For the first 10, it's a very middle ranking book for me because I've read all the first 10, and that, again, it's right in the middle for me. It's a kind of a slow burn book. It's definitely one of the slower paced books. And in my opinion, it gets a little boring here and there with some aspects of it. I think April as a character isn't very intriguing. She's very kind of whiny and very just, I don't know, she kind of gets on your nerves after a while. Like, you understand why she's hesitant and stuff, but it just doesn't really work for me because of how how I said she's whiny. I think Noah, or Lefty as he's nicknamed, is a decent character. Again, he's kind of annoying, kind of that prankster brother that is in a lot of Goosebumps stories. And yeah, I think the concept is really cool, and I like the whole idea of what transpires with this mirror. But I think overall, it's a slow burn book, kind of boring in points, and it's, in my opinion, nowhere near as good as a lot of the first 10 are. So I gave it probably around a 7 out of 10, probably.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I, since I'm curious about your thoughts, Alex, I'm gonna pass it over to you. What's your thoughts on Let's Get Invisible's book?
Well, I'll say this. I'm very excited to talk about this one because, yeah, this is probably one of my favorite Goosejunkies books, at least in the OG series. Though I have not read every single one, I'm pretty sure this is going to rank very high when I do come to actually finish every single Goosejunkies book. Because this one is not only a part of my favorite genre, mirror horror, it is actually quite frightening in my opinion. So, the plot of the book, like Micah said, is about a group of kids, I believe 4 or 5, finding this mirror in their attic. This mirror is not only mysterious, like the mystery aspect, you can kind of build off from there with your head what could actually be the origin of this mirror. Maybe a scientist lived there or a sorcerer, who knows. The mirror itself is really creepy. I think the way they describe it, how when you're being pulled in by a mirror, basically, how it's cold, uh, and it feels like you're being just dragged away into another realm. Very creepy how they describe it, and I think it is a very frightening image that it pops in my head. Now, the characters are okay, and the plot going on from there is them just getting slightly more crooked every time they come out. They may or may not have personality changes, and I think this is really cool because it has the addiction aspect. Because drugs can change you, because that's kind of what this is about, and we'll get into more drug themes later in this episode. Yeah, it is very interesting how this mirror changes these kids, and also visually too, and kind of makes them look like mirror images. And I think that's just a really creepy concept to me. And it's kind of why I like mirror horror so much, and this book does it pretty darn well. And besides that, yeah, like I said, the characters are pretty good. I think some of the scenes we get involving the invisible shenanigans are okay. And I think the climax of the book, when we get the big reveal of what's going on here, as well as it being creepy, I think it's really cool. And I think the resolution, though kind of rushed, leads into a very cool scene, which kind of makes you wonder why that mirror may or may not have been a. I'll let your mind wander. So, may have been selfish intentions from an evil character. But yeah, I really, really like this book's story. It's not anything too complex, and it's actually very slow paced too, which is something I actually really enjoyed about it because it took its time building up this mirror concept, which I obviously was a big fan of. So yeah, this story, I'm not going to give you an exact rating because it might spoil where I might put this, like if it'd be lower or higher in between. But yeah, let's just say it. I really, really like this story.
Great points, Alex. And basing, I guess I'll share my thoughts now. Listening to you and Micah talk about this, I've often said that Let's Get Invisible is one of like the great allegorical stories of Goosebumps. You know, it's played up 100% as an allegory of a deeper meaning. But in the book, Let's Get Invisible, it's more of a subtext thing, but it explores the characters, right? It takes its time with the characters. And while my negatives with it, I guess I'll share them now, is how stale the setting is. It's literally set in the attic almost the entire book. It never leaves the attic, but that's also, you know, if you've ever watched that 70s show, Where Do the Potheads Smoke? They always smoke down in the basement. That's where they're always hanging out. So it kind of mirrors reality a little bit on that. And I also do think there is a bit of repetition going on in the story. But besides that, the main character Max and how he has to deal with his younger brother and how he looks as an example to his brother really feeds into the drug addiction allegory that the book is describing, because when the kids find out that they have this mirror, mind you, in the book, I think in the episode 2, it's mentioned that the parents of Max's family acquired the house from their grandparents, so this mirror might have been around since the grandparents have lived there or before. All we do know is that it was hidden away in the attic somewhere. But they, let's just say they find this stash of mirror and they start playing around with it and they start to feel the side effects and what the mirror does to them. And throughout the story, you start to see Max starting to see his younger brother get into it, and it makes him really evaluate his decisions being older and looking more responsible, and it makes him have to grow up a little bit. And what happens in the story is that he has to be the voice of reason, even though there's his friend April the whole book trying to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And he has to step up to the plate and try to fix the situation. And not only that, the mirror reflections themselves kind of feed on the allegory itself too, because as Alex mentioned, as each time they get invisible, they come out a little more crooked each time, a little more backwards. They look like themselves, but they're not themselves. You know what I mean? And that's because they're, they've been replaced by somebody new, because drugs can affect your personality. It can affect a lot of things and how you carry yourself. So there's a lot of deep messages there if you're willing to peel them back. And I do like the concept of the cold world, of the mirror, as the main character in the climax gets to explore. There's a lot of unknowns with it, but I think the ambiguity here kind of helps sells it in some ways, even though the origin of the mirror is very glanced over. Aside from that, I think this is a pretty well thought out book. It's one of the longer normal Goosebumps books out there. I think this is like pushing 160, 170 pages for its time. That was a beefy book and still is today for a Goosebumps book. But I'd probably give it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars from memory, maybe a 9 out of 10. I applaud the effort Stein put into this one. I can see why people find it decent. It is a slow burn. It takes a while to get going, but when it does get going, and once you start to peel back what it's doing, there is a lot of rich things there. So that's just my thoughts, and I'm going to pass it over to BD. BD, what is your thoughts on Let's Get Invisible's book?
Yeah, so mirror horror has always been one that I know a lot of people are a big fan of. I've always just kind of been indifferent to it. I know we've all been in those moments where you look in the mirror and you always have that thought in the back of your head, what if one day my reflection doesn't do what I naturally do? And it's a very sort of paranoid feeling, a scary feeling. Funny story, my dad actually, as a kid, used to think that when he looked into the mirror and he blinked, his reflection would not blink back. And we had to get rid of the mirror in my mom and dad's room. So that's why he left me. He got sucked into the mirror. I'm kidding. It was divorce papers. Anyway, mirror horror is very, very creepy at times. It can be very scary. And I think one of the best things about this book is just the mirror realm as a whole. It's been touched on, but I think towards the climax of the book, the way that Stein writes about this mirror realm, the iridescent colors in it, the bright flashing lights, sort of like a twisted play on heaven. Once you enter there, it's super bright. It lures you in and puts you in a false sense of like comfortability, but it's actually trying to get rid of you and replace you. And the idea of evil clones being these twisted reflections of you and slight things being different, it's very cleverly done. But as when I first read this book, I thought it was decent, only for the point that again it's a slow burn. Now I've been a little bit more nice over time, and I would say this is a pretty good book. I give it like a 7.5 out of 10. I think the slow burn again is purposeful. It's meant to be the sort of drug allegory, the idea of building up an addiction. But just in terms of reading it, there was a lot of points that I thought it got a little bit repetitive and boring. There is some slow burn books like the first Monster Blood book where it gradually keeps building up in the stakes over time. In this book, the stakes do build up, but I feel at certain points it doesn't feel like they're constantly building up. It sometimes feels like the book is just going in circles. And then at the end, when it actually gets to the climax, that's the juicy part of the story. That's the big reveal. So I think this is a pretty good one. The characters are fine. I like them to a certain point. I think his name's Noah, right? Lefty. I like him specifically for the way the twist is very cleverly done. I think the twist in this story is probably one of the smartest twists that Stein arguably has done. It really works well. I think it's actually clever and it shocks you in a clever way. And I just think that Stein had a lot of creativity with the meat and bones of the story, but just the journey to lead there can get sort of repetitive and boring. But if you like it, I respect it because I don't hate the story by any means for its slow burn. I think it's all done on purpose, and it definitely felt like Stein was experimenting with the first 10 books. And this Let's Get Invisible book, I think, is a nice experimentation. Stein going in a different direction and trying to do something outside of his wheelhouse. So, yeah, 7.5 out of 10. This is a pretty good book.
So far, I think we all kind of agree that for a slow burn book like Let's Get Invisible, we all tend to appreciate the destination, not so much the journey getting to the destination. Which brings us to Bruce and Spongy's points. BD, you want to go ahead and read off Bruce and Spongy for us, so
Yeah,
we can move on to the episode.
All right, so let's go here. Okay, so first I'm going to start off with, let's see, I think this is Spongy's. Yeah, this is Spongy. So for the Let's Get Invisible book, this is Spongy's thoughts. This book, I think, works, and despite itself, not a lot of action happens as it feels afraid to really have fun with the idea, leading it to having a dull feel at times. But it has some charm to it, and there's solid writing. There's a lot of setup and payoff with things sliding nicely into place. The characters are mostly fun, and Max has a decent monologue with some introspective moments. Twist is a good, cruel one. The allegory element mostly stays as subtext and it doesn't quite do a lot deeper with it, but it's still nice to have some commentary. While I can see how some can be more on it, I think it's well crafted to be a good enough book. So those are
Yeah,
Spongy.
I like that he brought up that the subtext is it stays subtext because it's not like outward about it. This is definitely a book you have to peel it back because if you're not looking for it, you're not going to see it. But I think Spongy made great points there. Let's hear Bruce now.
Well, Let's Get Invisible book by Bruce. This one is kind of controversial in that it seems people sort of go back and forth on it in terms of their thoughts, and I'm no exception. This book is definitely still decent, but it has a hard time moving the plot and also making creative decisions. It feels like Stein never wanted to get back out of the same few scenes, getting recycled over and over with very little addition each time to entertain the reader. But none of that compares to my biggest issue, which is that it's a threat level 0 book. Threat level 0 is the term I made up for Goosebumps books with no real threat if the kids just wouldn't be stupid, and this is a prime example of that. So he gives it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, so what he's saying is that if they just stop using the mirror, everything is solved. Okay. Um, Fair enough, but at a certain point, it's kind of implied that maybe people are being taken over because an important scene. This is a mild spoiler near the mid portion of the book, dealing with Noah, aka Lefty, where he stays invisible too long, and that may or may not play somewhere near the end of the book, right? And we get to learn later on that people can be replaced by these mirror clones. So um, kinda threat level 0, but there is some action dealing with some of these mirror clones, and they're willing to like put you here in this forever purgatory. I mean, I think that's kind of menacing. That's some
Yeah,
stakes at least. It's not
I
really zero threat there.
Yeah, I would say I get his argument in threat level 0 books. I think they do exist out there. But I think some things to keep in mind is, well, first, it's a horror book. You have to put some disbelief at the door. I know it's very easy for us to retrospectively say, they just don't have to use it, but at the end of the day, they wouldn't be a story if they don't do that. But I also think that, as a lot of us brought up, it's a drug allegory, and you can always make the argument that, oh, you don't have to take the drug. But the thing is, once you first take the drug, you get addicted to it, and it's hard to get off of it. And it's much more deep than just not using the mirror. And as completionist brought up, this is not exactly a drug. It's a drug allegory. The stuff that actually happens in the mirror is interdimensional. It's next level. It's some actual threat level there. But I get what he's saying. Where like me and Micah brought up, it's a slow burn. You don't actually get to that threat level until the end. But I think to completionist point and to Alejandro's point, the drug stuff, the addiction is why these characters are doing what they do. And if Stein didn't build into that, it wouldn't be a drug allegory story. So that's my thoughts.
All right, I think we talked about the book pretty well. Alex, why don't you get us started on the episode of Let's Get Invisible? What's your thoughts on that?
So, before I get into my thoughts, this episode is a pretty true adaptation of the book. It follows Max in the attic with one of the two female friends. I believe there's two. I'm not quite sure. I think they switched up the genders or removed a character in the episode. And after a little bit of rumbling around with maybe his younger brother, something falls and it breaks a hole in the attic, revealing another room. This other room, once they crawl inside, they discover there's a giant mirror which looks like something at a carnival. Pretty funny. And when Max goes to turn off the light, sorry, when he turns on the light, since there's a little light switch on the mirror, and he turns it back off, it seems that he turned invisible in that time. And he doesn't believe it. And later that night, he's kind of thinking about it. Like, did that really happen? Or were his friends just messing around with him? So he goes back up there, and followed by his little brother, Noah. They may or may not discover if that was really true. And from there, it kind of goes in the same direction as the book, where they're using the mirror on and off to do a certain deed, turning invisible. Big surprise. And it may or may not go downhill from there with them changing slightly and acting a little different. And it seems that Max is very concerned about this mirror because it doesn't seem to be very cool once he starts feeling the cold from the other dimension. So, yeah, that's basically a brief summary of the episode. The episode, I think, is a very poor adaptation of the book. Now, I'm not just saying this just because, oh, I love the book so much, which I do, to be fair. But this adaptation just, there's some stuff that's really off. I think that it starts off in the attic, which is better. It gets straight to the point. Is good. I think that the mirror itself kind of looks goofy. I think the acting is very like stale, like not really good. And this is a weird downside for me, but the directing is really weird here. Some very weird shots where Max is gurgling on his, I believe, mouthwash, and it's such a weird shot. It's uncomfortable. There's a weird shot where he's just looking in the mirror. Yeah, it's so weird. There's some weird shots from like up ladders and stuff. It's not a very well directed episode. It's like they put the camera in just the weirdest of places, and it happens a lot. There's also some humor thrown in here a couple times, I believe. Specifically, one time involving the parents, and all of it falls flat. I believe there's a joke about hormones. It's pretty darn rough at times. And on top of that, we also got pretty meh characters. Like, they're less expanded upon in this episode. The pacing is all right, which I'll give it that. And it does do a good adaptation of the mirror, though I don't like the design of it. It still works the same way, and I like it. I don't really like the dimension and how they did it. I think the background is cool, but there's just some really weird stuff going on when it gets to that scene. And it looks like kind of what we're talking about. He's on drugs, like some hardcore drugs. Like, that's the best way to describe it. It is trippy. It looks like he is at the fun house on, I don't know, the moon. Maybe it's run by alien clowns, killer clowns from outer space. I don't know. It's just crazy. Way too weird. And yeah, the ending is still good here. I like it just as much as I like it in the book. And the acting is kind of off and better at times too. Also mentioned that. I said it was stale, but that's mostly at times, so there's that. And though I still don't really like this episode, I'd still recommend it. And I'd give it a 5 out of 10, like directly half bad, half good, or rather insanely mid.
You know, I don't blame you for that take. I guess I'll share my thoughts. To me, this is kind of like another Night of the Living Dummy 2 episode scenario where without that monologue from the book of Max or without that Amy Kramer monologue, you kind of lose the juice of the story. There's some loss in translation with the characters there. And Let's Get Invisible is another example of that I noticed in the show. That without that deeper stuff with Max, it doesn't hit the same. It comes off a little more like you're being like shown the story and not like told through the eyes of the character. Sometimes that's what makes a book more riveting and the better product. In the case of Dummy 2 in this, that's why I think the book, I'm getting ahead of myself, but I think the book is better than the episode counterpart because it was able to do the characters better. It was able to show you the stakes in a more deeper, impactful way. And you already brought up the acting in this episode. Some of my least favorite acting of the whole Goosebumps show as a whole. Pretty much every character minus Noah, who's played by Kevin Zegers. I love Kevin Zegers. He was in Air Bud. He was in a ABC Family movie I used to watch a lot called The Hollow. Big fan of you out there if you're watching, Kevin. But everybody else, like the main character Max, his actor, not that good. I mean, he's stone faced the whole entire time. I don't know if they picked him because he looks stoned all the time. Maybe they thought that was an inside funny joke, but the kid has no expressions on his face. The guy who plays Zach, oh my God, his line delivery is terrible. And he's easily like the oldest cast member. He's like 16 or 17 years old, and they're trying to say that he's a 12-year-old kid. No, 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 no. This kid has an Adam's apple and looks like he could be playing in the NBA. Absolutely not. And the effects are very dated. This is a 90s show, but this is one of those like with the mirror light up effects. I can't help but cringe a little bit every time I watch it. Um, and yeah, it's just a very condensed version without the stuff that made the book what it was. You know what I mean? And that's just how I feel about Dummy 2, essentially. I think this one is kind of like fine. I'd probably give this like maybe like a 3.5 from memory. I don't remember exactly how high I rated it from my review, but if I'm going off emotions, about like a 3.6, 3.7 in that average territory for me. So yeah. I'm going to pass it over to Micah now. Micah, what's your thoughts on Let's Get Invisible's episode?
It's a rough one. It's a rough one for me. Like, I agree with both of you guys. It's definitely worse than the book. There's a lot of things that I really just don't like about it. You know, as you mentioned, Max's acting is just so not acting. He's completely emotionless the whole episode, no matter what he's supposed to be feeling. He has the same blank expression the whole time. You know, also, there's a weird nitpick for me, but the parents in this episode look way too old to be the parents of like a 12-year-old and like a 10-year-old. They look like they're in their 50s or 60s. And like that they really should have picked some younger actors, I feel like, for that role, those roles. But minor nitpick, but still, it's just a thing I noticed. um I think the kid who played Lefty, or Noah, he's not really called Lefty in the episode, but I think he was pretty good. But yeah, acting all around was bad. The whole scene when Max gets pulled into the mirror looks atrocious. That it looks so bad. Like it almost has this weird like ice wall like background to it. And like all these dumb scenes of him like run, obviously it is Max running in place with like terrible CGI effects like flying past him of like mirrors and things like that with like these goofy looking screaming faces flashing by him. It's like it hurts to look at. Both from like just like a visual thing and just like it's just so cringy. And like I get it, it's from the 90s, but come on, you could have done something a little cooler with the mirror dimension than what they did. And like, yeah, I don't know, it's just a very bland episode, very forgettable one that you just kind of it's not going to be one that's ever really ranked in a top 10 for me or even top 20. It's a very low ranking episode for me personally. So, yeah.
You know, listening to you, Micah, you kind of reminded me of another thing. I forgot to bring this up too. I wonder if y'all feel the same. What this episode failed to do was to kind of fix the boring sins of the book. Like when I talked about like the stale setting of it being in the attic the whole book, basically, the episode still did the same thing essentially, and they just carbon copied some scenes that were mild shakeups, like the kitchen scene with Lefty, or maybe I think they went outside for a brief scene in the book. You see the in the episode, but they never venture out of the attic still. And it still kind of makes it boring. So I don't know why you just reminded me of that. BD, what's your thoughts on the episode?
So probably give it like a 6 out of 10. This is a meh, not that good episode. I don't hate it as a standalone, but it's definitely a downgrade to Let's Get Invisible's book. And it's sort of the way that we're talking about this episode reminds me of when we did Vampire Breath, because everyone almost unanimously saw the episode and they're like, yeah, that's a downgrade. Same thing with Let's Get Invisible. These guys have brought up some good points. First thing I want to say is, yeah, the characters are not that good. I'm not as harsh, maybe because I've been polluted by Are You Afraid of the Dark, which gets a lot of its actors from Salvation Army. Sorry, but you know the acting in that show can be atrocious, And some of the scenes in this episode are just corny and cheesy. Like completionist brought up, the oldest guy in this cast, what's it, Zach? That dude is way too corny for how old he is. I mean, his line delivery is really, really bad. Lefty, I think, does a good enough job for what he's supposed to be. He's got this like good shit-eating grin that he has throughout the entire episode, like the Sprouse twins. I love the Sprouse twins, but when they were little kids, that shit-eating grin, they were menaces, man. And this guy does the same thing. The main character Max is, like completionist brought up, boring. He never has any facial expressions. He never gets worried, even at the dinner scene when his little brother is invisible and doing these what looks like to the parents these poltergeist type of scenes. He's just straight, like he doesn't even react. He like when he's looking at his brother doing these invisible acts, he just stares at him like he'll just grab like a milk glass and just pull it back, and then he has to play it cool. It didn't make any sense. And like Alejandro brought up, there's like these weird mouthwash scenes that get a lot of focus. The climax, I'm sorry, those visual effects suck, dude. Those is horrible. I mean, the whole mirror realm in the book is this like iridescent, very bright lights, heavenly kind of place that lures you in. In the episode, that man was smoking purple haze. I mean, it looks horrible. It looks like a VHS TV background, just a blue fading screen. And then on top of that, you got these horrible after images. He's running in place. Then they put the man on a treadmill. You got this clock going in. And then at the end, you got the Twilight Zone. You got this rotating door that starts coming in. And next thing you know, I heard the theme. Dun, 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 dun. I thought Rod Serling was about to come in and slap the shit out of me because obviously those visual effects could only come from the Twilight Zone. It's just bad. It takes away all the good stuff that's in the climax of the book, which we all loved. We all loved the destination. And you know what's bad about this episode? And this I have to highlight. How is the journey better than the destination in this episode? I mean, the destination is supposed to be the selling point, and they reversed it. I actually prefer some of the invisible scenes compared to the actual mirror realm. So, whoever made this episode, you did what you could, but I think the priorities were messed up in this one, and it sort of just deflates the story. And I'm going to say this, there's a curse in the Goosebumps TV show with one-parters that adapt full-length books. The first 3 minutes is like Donnie Yen playing Ip Man with the punches that he does in the movie. I mean, you get back to back to back, just like like a kaleidoscope of just these scenes in the first 3 minutes that rushes through everything. Like the first 3 minutes of this episode just flies by a bunch of stuff, and then it gets into the rest of the story. I don't like that. Night of Living Dummy 2's episode did the same thing where the first 3 minutes are fast as hell and it just rushes through a bunch of stuff that's a slow burn or at least brought into development during the book. So yeah, this one 6 out of 10. I mean, I think they would have benefited from making it maybe a two-parter, but then again, the story is, it has boring stuff in it. So even I don't think the two-parter could have done much considering that, the build-up is boring. Whatever. You guys screwed up. That's all I have to say. 6 out of 10.
You know what they could have done? They could have moved the mirror to a carnival, and they could have done a carnival story with the mirror as a shakeup, and just said, "Hey, we're not going to put you in the attic, but we're gonna, make a spectacle out of it." Maybe they could have done that to save it a little bit, but I
Yeah, he
don't
could have
know.
pulled out. He could have pulled like a Haunted Mask 2 and just done kind of a loose adaptation of it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
just cut the book into something completely different.
There's a
Uh,
there's a story I read in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Anthony Masters, and it's called I think Ghost in the Mirror, and it is about this sort of mirror thing in a funhouse, and it does involve an entity in there. So yeah, that's a better idea. If you're out there listening, for anything in the future, make that into something. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
all
that'd be
right.
interesting too, because like it almost could have been a fusion of like the Let's Get Invisible book and the Funhouse episode from Haunting Hour, because the Funhouse also kind of has that addiction kind of idea.
That's a good point. That's true.
That is a
That's
good
another
point.
addiction story. I forgot about that.
Oh, there's another one we can pair off with the Funhouse later on, but we're gonna save that. Let's listen to Spongy and Bruce's thoughts on the episode, and then we'll declare the winner for Let's Get Invisible here.
All right, let's get into this. All right. So first up is going to be Spongy. Excuse me. So let's get Invisible episode. I think the episode is good. Certainly goofier, thanks to the wonky acting at times, but makes them more fun and isn't especially awful by the show's standards. It's tighter than the book and has its own fun moments. The mirror world looks cheesy in the best ways. Okay. Watch out for Ron Oliver's cameo as one of the victims. I like the touch of the mirror fixing itself at the end. It lacks the nice touches of the book, so for once I lean towards the book, but the episode is a bit tighter and more fun in places, so it gets those points at least. So that's Fungy's thoughts.
One thing I forgot to mention, there is some tweaks to the mirror in the episode. Like the mirror, like the whole ending scene with the mirror in the episode was not in the book, and I thought that was kind of cool, like as like a cliffhanger type of thing. I like that he brought that up. And yes, Ron Oliver, I think, did this episode, and he's a cameo in it. So there you go.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's really cool. I'm glad he brought that up.
Yeah.
Let's get invisible episodes. This is Bruce. Despite the book being kind of mid in some ways, but also having decent other parts, I had a lot of fun with this episode, and it's one I like to revisit a lot. I think a lot of the stuff in the book felt like it could have been done better in film, and I was right. Everything is fixed here, and it's one of the better TV show installments. 10 out of 10, perfect score. Okay.
10 out of 10.
Okay.
Bruce.
Okay. All right. All right.
All right, so I guess he likes the expediting and the tightness of the plot. I mean, that is a fair thing. If you're going to stack up the episode to the book, look, the book is dense, y'all. It's a dense book. It's going to take you a while. It is more repetitive than the episode. So if you're here to waste 21, 22 minutes, I get that perspective, but I have to disagree.
I think the episode is better if you are off the purple haze. So if anyone wants to go take the purple haze, go watch the episode.
So I think we're all. I think we have an agreement here, at least with us four, with the majority. Even Spongy, I think, alluded to this. We like the book more. So I think the book's going to be the representative going into Catching Cold, right? So now Catching Cold, in case you didn't know, it was a season one. I almost said Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's a haunting hour episode, and it was written by Neil Shusterman, who actually wrote the short story it was based on in Darkness Creeping. And BD, why don't you tell us about Catching Cold's short story?
Okay, so first off, for those of you who are not familiar with Neil Shusterman, very important writer to the Goosebumps TV show. He was involved with it heavily. And I just got to say it up front. This guy is a genius, and he's overlooked a lot of the time criminally. Just to go over some things that he worked on, he worked on the Awesome Ants episode. He worked on the Ghost Next Door episode. He worked on Werewolf of Fever Swamp and Night of the Living Dummy 3's episode. And Werewolf of Fever Swamp and Night Living Dummy 3's episode is amazing. So this guy has a lot of talent. He's very watch out, my God, watch out. This guy is very talented. He's a genius. And Catching Cold short story is actually the first short story in a collection called Darkness Creeping. I think in volume 3, but I'm not sure. And this short story is basically about this kid named Marty. Now Marty has an urban legend that he deals with sort of in this town. In this small town, there is an ice cream truck, this creamy cold ice cream truck that the music is always heard throughout the suburb. Kids try to find it and chase it, but they're never able to actually get to the truck. And it has a weird thing to it where once you try to catch the truck, you'll hear its music all around in different areas. You think you can get some glimpses of movement, but no one's ever been able to get it. And Marty, unfortunately, is sort of like a loser in terms of his life. He's always last in everything. And he's been very disappointed in the fact he's never been able to get this truck. So he decides, you know what? Since I've been failing throughout my life and a lot of stuff, this is my golden opportunity. Let me try to catch this truck that no one is able to get. And he tries to hash out a very detailed plan on how to get it. His father is a police detective, so he tries to get his help. He tries to do some thorough research on how he can finally get the truck. And him and his friend debate if it's worth it or not, if there's more than meets the eye involving this truck somehow. And they even bring up this kid named Jim Jeffries, who allegedly had become a urban legend, sort of like a scare your kids kind of fairy tale, where this kid apparently got to the ice cream truck and went missing. But there's no confirmation on him ever existing. The police say that he never existed. Nobody knows the last name Jeffries. So it's sort of like an urban legend in an urban legend. And eventually, Marty comes up with a plan on how to catch the truck. He executes it on 4th of July night, I believe. And when he does manage to get the truck, there's more than meets the eye. And potentially, he may have bitten off more he can chew or swallow with this ice cream cone than he was expecting. So that's basically the plot without giving too much away. Neil Shusterman is a genius, and I'm probably going to shock some people with this take, considering we're about to debate the two versions of the story. I think this short story is one of the best kids' horror short stories that I've read in a long, long time. And off rip, I give it a 9.8 out of 10. And depending on how I feel, I'm going to bump this up to a perfect, a 10 out of 10 short story. And I'm a harsh critic, harsher than a lot of the other panelists are on here. So I think that this short story is beautifully, beautifully done. So let me go into detail about why I love this short story. First of all, the way Neil Shusterman writes this short story is something I've never seen before, and it's brilliant. He will talk about a real life example of an urban legend or thing involving, our society, and then he'll cut into Marty's life, and then he'll go into another story and then cut into Marty's life. So the beginning of the short story starts off with Pavlov's classical conditioning, which a lot of you psychology majors know is about the dogs, training them to salivate at treats. And Neil Shusterman compares that to Creamy Cold's ice cream truck's music, the theme song, Pop the Weasel, that goes through the suburbs. So the fact that he did Pavlov's classical conditioning with dogs drooling to the urban legend of this delicious ice cream on this truck that everybody goes after, that's brilliant. Another one he does is, and this is my favorite thing he does in the book, is the Pied Piper urban legend, where he talks about the Pied Piper luring in kids and potentially leading them to a dreadful, disturbing fate due to the tune that he plays, obviously on his flute. And Neil Shusterman talks about how this urban legend could never be brought into the modern age because of all the different media and entertainment and stuff we have. We're always distracted by everything. So the Pied Piper would never work unless you get the losers of society, the scragglers, the people who are forgotten, the people who will not be missed. And Marty is that person, and the truck is the Pied Piper. That is creepy as shit. That is one of the most effective comparisons I've seen in terms of an analogy for the story. The next one is Moby Dick. The chase of the white whale Moby Dick is compared to the ice cream truck. Brilliant, brilliant. And of course, the tortoise and the hare. And this one is the most important story brought up in this short story, where Marty is the tortoise. He's a failure in life. He's never won. He's always been last in everything, in studies, in life, and friends. And this is his one golden opportunity, Willy Wonka's golden ticket to his success, where he can catch the ice cream truck. So he puts in a lot of time and effort. He shows his intelligence. He shows his persistence. And Jim Jeffries, the kid in the urban legend, is the hare. He was the star of a baseball team. He was the fastest kid on the block. He was the success. And when he caught it, something bad happened to him. So you have that debate of, should Marty pursue this urban legend? Is it actually worth it? And I like that comparison a lot. I've never seen an author take all these different fairy tales and urban legends and incorporate them into a story so well. So it's absolutely brilliant. And when Marty does his plan in the short story is more detailed than the episode. This guy goes through CT footage. He goes through like footage by an ATM in the town and sees if he can see the truck, and all you get is this white blur that's amongst the CCTV footage. So he realizes that it's real. I'm not crazy. I'm not paranoid. This thing exists because it explains in the short story that when he goes to chase the truck, it's like a Lovecraft feel where he hears the music in all different directions, but it may not exist. This is his chance. It exists. He puts out like a duffel bag full of bricks. He parks his sister's truck in or his sister's car in neutral to stall the ice cream truck, and then puts out the spike strip. Really, really detailed stuff. And this is my favorite scene in the whole short story. And I'm going to end it off here without giving too much spoilers. He finally does catch the truck, and the window, I mean, to this truck opens. An icy cold mist comes out, and he hears a deep, gruff, sad voice inside the truck of this man going, All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. Pop goes the weasel. And then you get some dimension warping, some teleportation, and there is a dark, dark fate for Marty. That was one of the most brilliant scenes I've read in short stories. The Pop Goes the Weasel theme song, sung by the victim potentially of this truck, then catching a new victim, and the ending to the story may or may not tie into like selling off your soul for power, which I think is really fun. Where the main character, I think, succeeds, but he succeeds not in the way he suspected. It's a dark fate. He finally gets the hand in power, but he sort of sold his soul to the devil, aka sold his soul to the truck. And it all comes at a cost, but he sort of gets imbued by this power and becomes malevolent by the end of the book. Short story, I think I'm just going to give it a 10 out of 10. This is a brilliant short story. Neil Shusterman is nothing short of a genius, and I'm genuinely so happy that I got to read the short story because I've never read anything like it in my life, and I want to pick up Darkness Creeping. I want to read all of his short stories. I want to read everything by Neil Shusterman now because not only is he brilliant in terms of TV shows, he's brilliant in terms of writing and stories. So this guy, he needs more love, and I'm excited to hear people's thoughts. But yeah, 10 out of 10, perfect short story.
You know, I, I love a lot of things that you brought up about it because I guess I'll share my thoughts on it now. When I was reading Darkness Creeping, I just recently made a review. I was making a mental note. I'm like, I've never seen a writer write like Neil Shusterman does, and specifically in Volume 3, where Catching Cold is put in, he puts like detailed origins and he shares with you how he came up with some of these ideas, and you can tell that the guy, he'll find something completely random or think of something completely random that should not work, but he makes it just enthralling and you want to read about it. And one thing I love about the short story of Catching Cold, I know we haven't got to the episode, but I guess I'm going to jump to comparisons here, is the fact that in this version of Catching Cold, this feels like the non-budget restricted version of Catching Cold. As we saw in the episode, when we get to that, I will mention budget as probably the reason why certain changes happened. But here, this is such an atmospheric story. I don't think I've ever read a Fourth of July kids horror story or one that could fit well. And this kind of like itch to scratch I was looking for. Like you brought up with the comparisons to classic literature, like The Tortoise and the Hare or Moby Dick, the list goes on. What's even more funny is that he picked Pop Goes the Weasel as the jingle to the ice cream truck, and the catch is all around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel, right? You look at the symmetry there. Marty's the monkey, the creamy cold ice cream truck is the weasel. It's a cat and mouse game. There is no real addiction element here because, unlike the episode, it takes a while for him to actually get a taste of the ice cream. And when he finally tastes it, the ending happens essentially. So this is more of a character trying to prove himself and trying to make a name for himself more so than going through addiction, which, you might be like, well, why'd you pick this for the addiction? It's because the episode is the more well known version of the story. But this version is still very well done. Um, I do have some mild issues with it, and it does involve certain things. When we're dealing with like the legend aspect of like the kids, they all can hear it in this version of the story. In the next version, we'll talk about not everybody can hear it. It's very selective on who it chooses. It's more methodical in that way. But in this version, everybody can hear it, but nobody's like ever been able to catch it, right? But at the same time, there's also some things about the ice cream truck in terms of what exactly is its motives, right? And like who's it coming after, and like it feels like there's some answers that the episode kind of answers, that the short story doesn't, in terms of like why it's doing what it's doing. So I do feel like there's some missing pieces that I think the episode, like, honestly, I mentioned this in my short story versus episode video on Catching Cold. that there are some aspects in the short story that I wish were in the episode, but there's also aspects from the episode I wish were in the short story. I think if you take the best elements of both, you make an ultimate product. But with that being said, I still give this like a 9, maybe like a 9.5 out of 10, or like a 4.5, 4.75 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favorite stories from Darkness Creeping. Not my favorite one, but it's exceptional. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna pass it over to Micah. Micah, what's your thoughts on Catching Cold's short story?
I thought it was a pretty well done short story. There was some elements that I liked, some elements that I wasn't a huge fan of. Like, while you brought up the idea of comparing things to classical literature, which I think was cool, in my opinion, it was just a little too wordy a lot of the time, and it gets, I don't know, I don't know how to really describe it, but it just kind of was a chore to read after a while for me personally. Still good, nothing, that wasn't a negative really. I just feel like it was a little wordy at times. I think it's interesting how different Marty's character is in the short story versus the episode, because they are very different iterations of the character. And it's really interesting, like the whole intricacies of Marty's plan to how to capture the truck is cool. And like the whole idea of the truck being known by all the kids, honestly, as Completionist Cowboy mentioned, it's a little bit of a weaker point for me. Because I much prefer it in the episode where it's more targeted specifically at Marty. And it's kind of supposed to be him specifically getting this ice cream and wanting to be the new soul. I think the ending of the short story is really creepy. You know, the whole idea of just like this truck opening and just hearing someone creepily singing Pop Goes the Weasel. I mean, why would you stick around for that? I would hear that and I'd be running in the other direction. Like, that seems like an obvious stranger danger kidnapping plot, and I'm getting out of there. But like, it just kind of shows how desperate Marty is to get this ice cream and to taste it. Like, he doesn't care, even though there's so many red flags, he doesn't care because he just wants the ice cream. And that kind of plays into the ending. And I think the ending, I prefer the episode's ending just because it feels a little bit more sinister. Because in the short story's ending, Marty kind of accepts his new role, which I feel like is still creepy, but it's, I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it's as horrible of a fate as the episode kind of makes it out to be. And also, I'll get it. I don't want to go too in depth on my thoughts on the episode, but like, I also think that Jimmy Jeffries as a character, I think I liked him better how he was portrayed in the episode. Personally, just kind of some of the things they did with him, but I'll get more into that when we talk about the episode. So, still a really good short story, though.
Yeah, I like it that you brought up the mechanics of the ice cream. I think this is an important thing to kind of point out before we pass it any further. As we'll talk about in the episode, the ice cream is definitely the source of addiction, and the addiction allegory. That's how the episode formats its story. But in the short story, it's formed like a trophy. It's formed like the prize, like the call to victory for Marty. So this is it's kind of like a Haunted Mask 2 scenario where we're seeing two alternate versions of the same character, but they have different trajectories in each story. Like if you go from Haunted Mask 2's book to the episode, it kind of feels like two totally different versions of a similar concept. So, yeah, I like that you brought that point up and the mechanism of the ice cream. That's really good. We'll pass it over to Alex, and then we'll go over Spongy and Bruce, and then we'll do the episode. So, Alex, what's your thoughts on the short story?
Y'all stole my thoughts. That's what. Yeah, I have very little to add here. I'm pretty much indifferent from at least BD and Completionist here. I really liked this story. I thought it was very clever in its writing with all the comparisons, which was something I found really unique about this because I've never seen this before. I don't know if this is like a common thing in literature, but I've read a lot of books throughout my life, not just Goosebumps and horror, and I've never seen this before. I thought it was really cool, and if I ever see Darkness Creeping, you bet your ass I'm going to pick it up. Sorry for my language. Yeah, so the comparisons here were really nice. I thought the scene involving Marty uh, getting this plan into action was really cool. And Marty's character here, though I liked the addiction aspect in the episode more, I liked how Marty's character was written here. I liked how he was just stepping up and trying to prove himself and to kind of do a favor for everybody around him, like all the stragglers, as it was described. And looking at my notes here for anything I possibly can mention that is different from what Shell mentioned, Uh, Nothing. But to be fair, I actually have a downside, which is something I could be forgiving on, and this is just depending on if I want to forgive it or not. Because it's something just bugged me, with the short story, and that is the fact that it's a short sorry a Fourth of July story. Now I don't hate Fourth of July. I love the holiday. It's my favorite holiday, probably of all holidays besides Halloween. It just feels weirdly like plot convenience because the whole point of it was just to get the parents out of the way so nobody would be there. And of all summer days, it could have just been any other day, but it had to be 4th of July. It just feels weirdly coincidentally perfect. And well, that sounds great that it's coincidentally perfect. I don't know. It just bugged me that it was weirdly just 4th of July. So the plan would perfectly work on this perfect day where nobody would be there at their homes, which is weird enough because usually, at least for me, people are shooting off fireworks on their fucking porch, like right on their driveway. So it just kind of feels odd. But I don't know. If I wanted to forgive that, I probably would, and I'd bump it up to like a 9 or a 9.5 out of 10 even. This short story was really freaking good, man. But the episode, it is pretty darn close, so I'm excited to talk about that really soon.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought up another thing. That's a good thing about Marty in the short story is that he's doing this for everybody. He's kind of acting like a Robin Hood, where he's like, "I'm going to be that guy to catch it, and I'm going to win it for all of us." Like he's not well, he's trying to do it for himself for his own credit and to prove to himself that he can be a winner. But at the same time, he wants to do it for everybody else that thinks that they couldn't do it. That kids have given up on it. Nobody obsesses over it like he does. And I definitely see maybe that the obsession angle that we see in the short story was the basis of how Shusterman wanted to tweak it for the Haunting Hour counterpart. Because I think that's what evolved into the addiction that we saw, which is interesting. But let's go over Spongy and Bruce's thoughts, and then we'll go over the episode.
Yeah, and also I was definitely going to say that's why I like the Willy Wonka's golden ticket thing that I tie to the short story, because Willy Wonka's golden ticket, it was to the chocolate factory, the best tasting chocolate in the world. Here, he gets Willy Wonka's golden ticket in catching this truck because he's going to get the best tasting sweet in the world. And on top of that, if he decided to change his mind to the people would very much be like, no, no, no. If you catch it, you're doing something that, as brought up, we've never been able to do before. So this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. But Neil Shusterman turns Willy Wonka into a diabolical entity as a twist. So yeah, I really really like that aspect. Let's get to Spongy's thoughts and then Bruce's thoughts. So here's Spongy's thoughts. Catching Cold short story. Won't say much here. It's basically compared to the episode, but it's still an evocative idea with solid writing. To think of it comparing to classic stuff like Moby Dick was on the nose and not quite needed, though. You still get good qualities of the episode, so it shows how smart Neil was when it comes to expanding it. So those are his thoughts. He didn't give a score, but that's the general. And then Bruce's thoughts for the short story. Although I like the episode, this one is actually better in my opinion. Bruce, you're fucking base for that. It's not only improves on the atmosphere, build up, and characters, but it actually gives me some weird nostalgic feelings, which I think to come some of the nods to things that were popular at that time. I really like the short story. I would give it a 9 out of 10.
I think we all will say that. I think the short story does a little bit better in some areas overall. I think the atmosphere of the short story is better. Hands down. The Fourth of July atmosphere, the summertime, you can't really replicate that in the episode, and we'll get into that in shortly. But one thing I think that everybody seems to like about the short story, at least, is how Marty's displayed, right? And I don't know if this is going to play a factor for you all going into the episode counterpart, because the episode is like that, like I said, that Haunted Mass 2 treatment where it's a alternate reality version of the story, but you still have the same skeleton almost. In the episode counterpart, in the Haunting Hour version, it's pretty much about Marty. He's a lazy kid. He's laying around. His mom and dad are desperately trying to get him active and doing things, but he's only really interested in eating, essentially, right? One day, the ice cream truck comes around. He hears the jingle, pop goes the weasel. and he's like, I need money. He contemplates on asking his mom. His dad, who's a police officer, comes home with puts his wallet on the table. He contemplates stealing from his father, but he ends up finding $1. He sees the truck. He actually sees it in this version. He tries to chase it down, but no avail. So Marty is chatting with his friend about the creamy cold truck that he sees, and his friend's like, "Oh, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear a jingle. I didn't see no truck." And the mailman, that's kind of symmetrical to the short story, mentions the legend of Jimmy Jeffries. And Jimmy Jeffries in this version, he was kind of like Marty, saying that he heard this ice cream truck, but nobody else did. And then Jimmy Jeffries up and left one day and never came back home, assuming that maybe he had found the truck. And he actually disappeared pretty much a couple of days after he said that he started hearing the truck. So, with that information, Marty goes home that night, but he wakes up to the ice cream truck coming to his house. And he goes to his front doorstep, and the ice cream truck has left him a taste of what it offers. And he thinks that it's the best tasting food, the food of the gods. He wants more, but the truck runs off and makes another cat and mouse game out of it. And Marty, for the remainder of the story, now is going through withdrawal symptoms, where he is completely obsessed with getting more of this ice cream at any cost. He's talking to his friend Ari about it. His friend Ari thinks that he's kind of overhyping it, but he's like, you just don't understand. He starts to become distant, like that drug allegory type of thing. He's, destroying his friendships without purposely doing so. He's compulsively drawing ice cream in his notebook and licking it. He's doodling in his math textbook. At night, when he's listening around, he hears the jingle of the water pipes making the same jingle of the ice cream truck. It starts to get to his mind. He looks like he's a junkie. His hair becomes disheveled. It's believable. And at a certain point, he finds something in the back of his dad's cop car that he's going to use to possibly stop this vehicle once and for all so he can get more ice cream, which may or may not succeed. And we get to learn a grisly fate for Marty after he stops the creamy cold ice cream truck. Um, so yeah, in this version, my thoughts on this is that this is definitely a darker version of the story wholesale. Whether you want to look at it from, um, if you look at it from the short story was more of like a coming of age style angle with, Marty wants to kind of prove himself. In this version, Marty is kind of his own worst enemy. He can't look past his vices, and that's what gets in front of him. Yeah, he might not be as likable, but you can empathize with the situation, even though, like, he's a lazy kid, he's kind of brash, but at the same time, you see what he's going through. And I think Robert Capron, who plays Marty in the episode, does a fantastic job at showing over time how more unhinged he becomes as his addiction worsens and how his desperation worsens. So coupled that with I think the darker ending, because as Micah pointed out about the short story he kind of accepts his fate. But in the episode when he learns his fate, not only is it disturbing when you see Jimmy Jeffries in his state inside that ice cream truck, but Marty is petrified of the realization that he's in. He's absolutely frightened. He wants out, but there's no hope, right? And one thing I think the episode does that I wish was in the short story, and this is why I mentioned it earlier on, is the fact that in the short story there was really no explanation as to who exactly this truck was looking after. I guess it was kind of implied that everybody could hear it, but only the ones that were the outcast or the ones that really wanted it. But at least in the short story, they kind of make it a mythical being, like a Santa Claus or an Easter bunny. You have to believe it exists to hear it, right? And that's the catch-all reason they give Marty for why he's experiencing what he is. And there's also some ambiguity about that, whether he's actually hallucinating this the whole time or not, or maybe there's a lot of fan theories out there about it, but it feels more personal, and especially when you look at the ice cream truck offering a taste, let's just say, giving him the taste of addiction. There's something methodical about it, and it gives the truck a little more personality and more of a character than the short story as well. So there's give and takes here, but honestly, after reading the short story and watching the episode, I think I still love the episode more. I know The episode doesn't have the stronger atmosphere. It's set in that generic haunting hour neighborhood, like most of the other neighborhood stories are. It's actually dreary outside and rainy most of the episode. It's not summertime and Fourth of July. I guess that's the budget. I'm clearly seeing budgetary issues with certain things that I'm assuming Shusterman wanted to put into the episode, but knew that the budget would be an issue. But for the changes here, I think it does tell a very good thematic story. It's cut and dry. It's easy to follow, and I can totally see why many fans say that this is one of the pillar haunting hour episodes. Like this is one of like the Mount Rushmore of the show, like the more iconic, easily recognizable one. Everybody knows the ice cream truck episode. So yeah, I'd give this like a 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5. I love it. So that being said, BD, I know how much you love Haunting Hour, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts first on this. What's your thoughts on Catching Cold's episode?
So this one I would say is a really good episode, and honestly, I think that like completionist brought up, this is two alternate universes of the same sort of skeletal structure of a story. So I think that this is kind of like, no pun intended, a chocolate and vanilla ice cream thing. If you like chocolate ice cream, you may like the episode more. If you like vanilla, you like the short story more. I can completely understand if you like either version more, because I think they're both equally good to a certain degree. This is just my personal opinion. I do prefer the short story, so just spoiler alert, because you're going to see from my score of the episode. But this episode is really good, and I think it's probably one of the best addiction horror stories out there in kids horror. There's actually a quote in Buddhism that I want to highlight because I think it's very important to both of these stories, which is that there's a line in Buddhism that's called "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one." And this kind of plays into both the short story and the episode, where in the short story, Marty is the honored one because he thinks that he's the only one who can achieve this goal that is, unfathomable to a lot of people, catching the ice cream truck. But in the episode, he's the honored one because he thinks that the rest of the people are not worthy. They've not been chosen. They don't deserve to get this delicious ice cream as much as he does. And it starts breaking him down and breaking down his character. It was brought up that he ruins friendships. You see with his friend Ari, I think. Ari is a really nice best friend. I mean, he's that type of best friend that you want in your life. He's a really empathetic guy. He helps him out. He's always encouraging Marty throughout the episode. And even when Marty's having, this withdrawal, he's, suffering a bit, he brings him ice cream. And I thought that was like wholesome. I thought that was actually sweet that he brought him a container of ice cream just to kind of help him out. And Marty basically takes a dump in his face. He just, mouths him off. He just yells at him. He says that your ice cream and your attempts at friendship is nothing compared to what the truck gives me. And that's really powerful in a certain regard. So I thought that was really well done. Um, I think the aspect of the ice cream truck in this episode is, it was brought up that the truck in this episode is more sinister. In the short story, Jim Jeffries is sort of a more sinister figure. You sort of feel that Jim Jeffries in the short story kind of is like a mastermind or plays an integral part to the truck. Here, the truck is its own entity. It specifically targets a straggler kid. It targets a, fat kid who likes sweet things and basically ruins his relationships. And the best scene in this entire episode, which I need to bring up, is when Marty is sleeping in his bed and the sink starts dripping to Tap Goes the Weasel. And then his alarm clock starts going off in the fashion of, Pop Goes the Weasel. And then the truck appears. And this truck is iconic. Now, as a kid, this episode always was iconic to me. I always remembered it because when do you ever get an ice cream truck horror story just in general? So the design on this truck is awesome. If you've ever played Cuphead, the ice cream cone face looks like something out of the Cuphead game. I mean, it's got this huge, wide comic eyes. It's got this surprise grin. And there's a weird, stranger danger, creepy element to the truck where I don't know if you guys picked up on this, but when it popped up outside of his driveway, and it put the ice cream cone in front of the door and he started eating it. It sort of felt like that, your parents tell you don't go to the white van with the candy. It's like it's sort of luring them in with the sweets, and it's really, really uncomfortable in a good way, like it's meant to be creepy. Um, and I think that Marty being different for the book is important to the sort of creepy ending because Marty in this episode is sort of dumb. He's kind of a klutz. He's not as smart as he is in the short story where he put in all this time and effort and research to catch the truck. Here he's sort of a bumbling idiot. You know, he doesn't like working out, doesn't like riding his bike. He doesn't put much thought into anything in terms of school. He just wants to get this ice cream, and he's a very easy victim to pick off by the truck. And that ending, yeah, what happens to him in this episode, I will say I prefer. I like the short story aspect where it's sort of like selling your soul off to the devil. You know, you sort of take power at the cost of, you know, kind of selling off your integrity. Here, the poor kid is a victim through and through. I mean, he has this moment of clarity when it's too late, and it is horrific, dude. And Jim Jeffries in this one, again, he sort of, you know, manipulates and does some you know, fish and bait right there, tries to get lure him in. And he looks like Hagrid. I just want to bring that up. He looks like frozen Hagrid. I also like the fact that his baseball T-shirt was too short, so his stomach was sticking through. There's certain things involving Jim Jeffries here that sort of lets you know that this guy was a poor kid too, who got chosen and manipulated by the truck. So this story has a lot of layers. It's a good addiction story. You got some really creepy stuff in here. Although I prefer the short story, if you were to tell me you like this episode, I don't blame you. This episode is really good in its own right, and I can get why people love it as much as it does. And again, hands down, this is the most iconic episode. I mean, I think everybody who watches this episode as a kid or as an adult is always going to remember it to a certain regard. So, shout out to Robert Capron. Robert Capron, or Caprone, I don't know how to say it, but shout out to you because you are an underrated kids horror actor. You're in two really good episodes in the Haunting Hour. And those two Haunting Hour episodes I actually give similar scores. So I wish we could have seen more out of you. It's never too late if you want to get back into the horror game. But I would give this one an 8.8 to a 9 out of 10. This gets easily a high B to borderline A. Really, really good episode. I really, really enjoy it. And those are my thoughts. Please, you know, go check it out. And I'm sure these guys all feel the same way.
Yeah, Micah, what's your thoughts on the Catching Cold episode?
Now, I haven't watched every Haunting Hour episode out there, but this is by far one of the best ones, in my opinion. It's just, there's something about it. Like, I've seen videos covering this episode before, but this is the first time I've ever watched it in full. And it's just really well done. I actually like that kind of gloomy, cloudy atmosphere. I mean, that's just kind of the atmosphere in every Haunting Hour episode. I've noticed that it's very common atmosphere for the show. And I think it adds this almost creepy vibe to the town, and this ice cream truck just coming by, and always just only Marty sees it. Nobody else knows what he's talking about. His friend is confused and gets concerned for him. It's kind of what BD brought up. I like that his friend is actually like wanting to help this guy. And even when he's like buying the bike off of Marty, which is another thing, like Marty goes off the deep end in this episode with the things he does. Like his dad buys him this not brand new, but buys him this nice bike just to help him, exercise and get out there more. Just a kind gesture the loving father gave to his kid. And Marty just immediately turns around and sells this bike off to his friend. And even then, when his friend is giving him the money, he's like, "You can always buy this bike back for me if you want to, dude." And it's like, it's just cool when you see those kind of friend characters who, like, even though they're still technically aiding the character in their negative or bad quest, they're still willing to help them and still are saying, like, again, like, if you change your mind, I will sell this back to you or give this back to you or whatever they want to do. And I think that was really cool. The whole addiction aspect is really well done. I think just everything they do, from the way he like just draws the ice cream cone and licks it, was really just like, it just stands out because that's something that's I'm feeling real people who suffer through withdrawals do that kind of stuff. And just like how the way the truck is more of an individual character, and how it almost lures Marty in with this ice cream, and literally every single time he eats it, he wants more, and before it never gives him more. It always drives away before it lets him get it. And just the whole, and also like the scene both of you brought up that stood out to me is easily that scene when he's hearing Pop Goes to Weasel and everything. Like that scene like creeped me out. Like just imagine like having this truck in your brain, constantly thinking about it, and then you're just asleep in the middle of the night. and you hear that music playing everywhere from your faucet to your alarm clock. Like, that is haunting to me. I don't know what it is about that, but and I just find that really creepy. And then, of course, like, the way they do the ending is really well done. I feel like Jimmy Jeffries is much creepier in the episode than he is in the short story. Like, the way this truck has almost driven him insane. Like, he's like singing like a little jingle to himself. He's just laughing maniacally during the whole thing, and just he acts just completely crazy. Like, again, as this truck has almost drained him of everything that he's had, and it's just like hollowed out husk of who he used to be, and that he's so happy and relieved with this like sick, demented joy about the fact that Marty showed up to take his place is just so creepy to me. And just and he almost gave kind of like, I hate to say this, but kind of giving me pedophile vibes in some ways, the way he acts. And then, of course, like, the ending again is a lot darker, where Marty realizes his fate and it's already too late. The truck seals him off and he can't escape and drives away while Jimmy Jeffries is just laughing at him hysterically. And it's such a great way to end that episode off. And that's what I love about Haunting Hour, is it usually ends on a bad note for most of these characters. It's not like Goosebumps where there's a very ambiguous ending. No, Haunting Hour is definitive. It is not afraid to kill these kid characters sometimes in pretty gruesome ways. So, like, I always like that in a kid's show. It's definitely wanting to go more of that dark route and actually scare kids, unlike Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, which are usually more silly and lighthearted.
Yeah, and you know what blows my mind? Two things. You brought up the music, right? And the Pop Goes the Weasel jingle plays throughout this whole episode, basically, and it gets more and more unsettling. It kind of adds to the unsettling nature of it. You know what it reminds me of? If you've ever seen Halloween 3: Season of the Witch, with that
Yep.
song, is like Happy Happy
Yep.
Halloween. As the
Hmm.
movie goes along, the more you hear this music, it kind of adds to, like, okay, what are we getting to? And it starts to make you feel a little more uneasy the more and more you hear it. That's exactly. I don't know how they pulled it off, but they were like able to pull it off like Halloween 3 did with the music. So applause to Peter DeLuise, who directed it, and whoever did the sound score. And the second thing is, Neil Shusterman himself, he wrote the short story and he also wrote the screenplay for the episode. So the fact that he was able to, get this opportunity and get this idea, like, hey, I can go this whole different direction with my own story. I'm going to try this, see if this works. And he made two phenomenal stories out of it, is impressive. Um, and it almost feels like two, like as we already said, two totally different versions. Um, Alex, what is your thoughts on Catching Cold, the episode?
So I'm pretty indifferent here. This episode is awesome, and really on par with the short story. I like the direction this took as well, where it's more addiction focused and it's more selective. The ice cream truck, instead of course, everyone can hear it in the short story, and Marty is just the one who decides to step up and actually try his absolute hardest to prove himself and succeeds, of course. And I like how he succeeds in both, but it results in different kinds of endings. And the ending in the episode I found to be really creepy. I found whoever did the makeup effects for what was his name, Jimmy Jeffries, perfect. I thought it was really creepy, and the way it was just lingering back there in the back of the ice cream truck, watching him do this was really creepy. And then he just abruptly talks, and Marty barely even notices that he's even there because he's obviously pretty prominent. He's big and he has light on him. He's not completely dark in the corner. It's just like he's so distracted by his ice cream, he doesn't even notice that there is a man in there with him. It's kind of weird like that. And I really, really thought that was cool too. A cool detail. And yeah, I like the ending after that where the action truck just drives off with Marty, and it may or may not result in a switching of places and not a switching bodies, thank the Lord. Those stories can end up bad in kids' horror. But yeah, I really, really like that ending. Besides the ending, of course, enough rambling on that. The whole episode is just as good as that ending, I'd argue. It opens up with Marty trying to get to the ice cream truck, but of course failing, kind of setting up the idea of this almost impossible to get truck that nobody even knows exists, which is pretty cool. And Marty's a good character, and he has a good actor behind him who played Rally and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So shout out to Rally, I guess. And I believe also another actor from Diary of a Wimpy Kid was in this episode. He played his.
Yep, the girl who played Patty Farrell was his sister.
Yep. And I thought that was cool to have two actors from Diary of a Wimpy Kid, another kids book series, by the way. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Really nice to have those actors there, but yeah, they both did good jobs for what screen time they get, specifically, of course, the main character. Yeah, he did a good job with all his scenes, and I think his character progression throughout the episode, where he gets less now social and interactive with his family and friends, even if he wasn't really like that at the start, and more mean kind of towards the end, of course, to his specifically friends, and more manipulative to his family, like he's faking stuff, like, oh, he's so thankful for the spike, sells it like a minute later, and then he's like, oh, I'm going out for a bike ride, which I want to mention in a minute, and he's just about to literally blow the tires off a truck. Yeah. He's getting very demented throughout the episode. I really like that. Now, I do have an issue, and nobody's mentioned this before. I'm surprised. What suburban neighborhood lets a kid go out bike riding at the dead of night? It's like 10 p.m. God damn. It is so dark out there, too. It's not even like a light dark. It is like pitch black out there. Very dark. And this kid's going bike riding. I don't know if this is normal, but it is very much not normal here. You're not allowed to pass 8 p.m. If you're a minor. So, yeah, at least in my state, that is not legal. And these parents just let him go out willy-nilly to ride 15 miles on his bike. And by the way, he's a bit on the heavier side. No mean to be rude. So, like, he could get extremely tired. You might need to pick him up or something. And 15 miles is a lot of miles, to be fair. I don't know. I just think that was a really stupid thing. And it kind of falls in the same thing that I found with the short story, only this is more of an issue to me, where it's kind of plot convenience. 4th of July, so a parent-child way, plot convenience in the short story. This, oh, he can go bike riding at night because that's apparently legal in this universe. Yeah, A-okay. Plot convenience. And that's it for issues. I just thought I'd bring that up because I thought it was really funny too. It's kind of a stupid ass issue. But
when I was watching the episode earlier, I noticed that, and the thing I noticed was there's like a running gag in the episode where like the parents look at each other when they're talking about Marty and like how they want him to get in to do stuff. And the fact that the dad is still a police officer in the episode, and when he hears like Marty's finishing up his dinner real fast, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go for a bike ride." They look at each other like they're happy, like, "Oh yeah, he's going outside finally." Okay, yeah, like they're like cool with it because he never goes outside. So I guess they were cool with it because he's never done it before. Now the whole thing where he's lying and exaggerating the truth, like, yeah, I rode 15 miles. That's complete BS, and you can sniff that out. I'm surprised the parents were like, "Are you sure about that? Where are you?" But if you have to look past that little moment there. But it's not like the most egregious thing ever, in my opinion. I've seen way worse in Haunting Hour where they try to pass over something really dumb and just pretend it doesn't happen to push the plot forward. Yeah, that moment kind of does push the plot forward, but then again, it's going for that. Obviously Marty sold his bike for drug money. That's what they're trying to play up. The symbolism there, and Marty's now lying to his parents saying where he's going because that's what teens do when they're doing drugs. So there's symbolism in all of that. So why don't we read over Spongy and Bruce, and we'll wrap up the winner, and then we'll get into our discussion.
Yeah, before we do that, I just got like 3 quick little things to add. I also wanted to highlight the chicken scene in the episode that I thought was really cool, where Marty's facing off against the truck on the street and he's playing a game of chicken. He's waiting for the truck to get right there and run him over, and then he moves away. I thought that was really cool because it just shows you that it's him versus the truck. It's the opposition. So I thought that was a cool scene as well. And this is more so like not a missed opportunity, but I thought it would have been cool. I thought another maybe cool scene they could have added to the episode is like maybe have Marty and Ari go to like a like ice cream shop or somewhere, and let's say the ice cream shop in the town has like a normal, cone mascot, and when he looks at it, he sees the face of the creamy cold ice cream truck cone, and then it goes away, or he's inside the store and he hears Pop Goes the Weasel, and then his friend shakes him out of it in the moment, and then he realizes that it's a completely different tune. I feel like that could have been a cool thing as well. And the third thing is, I just want to highlight the fact that Diary of a Wimpy Kid has a lot of actors in the Haunting Hour.
Mhm.
Robert Capone is in there, but also the guy who plays the main character is in Night of the Mummy, I believe, and
Mhm.
Fregley is in Alien Candy. So shout out to Diary of a Wimpy Kid. A lot of you guys went to go do kids horror roles, so I thought that was a cool little thing in Haunting Hour. So let's get on to their thoughts. So first up is Spongy. His thoughts on the episode are Catching Cold episode. I've talked about this one a fair bit as it's solid. It's a solid favorite for me, although it has been bumped down to top 15 instead of top 10. The addiction aspect was added for the episode and was a brilliant move. This is a goofy idea with bits that should be laughable, like Marty licking the paper, but there's an effective feel to it and sells this whole addiction element. It shows the lengths some will go for their fix and has a solid creep factor. Predictable twist, but it works with the cycle element. A strong episode that uses commentary to help a creepy story and make an ice cream truck scary. Now that's impressive. Those are his thoughts. And next up
Yeah.
is Bruce. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was going to say yeah, I agree with that.
And then his one is so for Bruce, I'm not huge on Haunting Hour in all honesty, but there are some episodes that break my expectations, and this was one of them. The acting here is very solid, same with the writing and scares. The way the episode is shot is very creepy, and it has a great atmosphere. Overall, I really enjoy this episode, and I recommend it 8 out of 10. So those are their thoughts.
Okay, so both are really positive. Spongy said it's in top 15 of the show, not quite top 10. So I'm assuming it's probably number 11 or something. Close. But I think catching cold. I think we might have to like do a tally here because it's so close. By show of hands, who thinks that the short story is better, or they like the short story more? BD, I can't see you, but I'm thinking that your hand's up. Um,
Give me a second.
um, but yeah, I think BD would probably say the short story is better. But Alex, do you think the episode is better?
Um, Neither actually. I actually vote Let's Get Invisible's book, but to be completely fair, uh, I'm not voting either because I think they're tied. I don't mind if any of the two win. Uh, so have at it.
Okay, so okay, for the representative though, what are we picking for catching cold? Are we picking the episode or are we picking the short story?
Episode.
Catching Cold, I say episode.
Oh, can
I
y'all
say.
can y'all see me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, the catching cold truck got to me. Spirits in my house. It just got rid of my camera for a second. But yeah, I would give it to the short story. I prefer the short story. So that's my pick. That's my one.
And I think Bruce picked the short story, but I think Spongy also, given his words, probably would pick the episode. So it's a 4v2 there. Close, but like both are respectable picks. I think Catching Cold either way is great. But Catching Cold's episode is going to be the Facer against Let's Get Invisible's book. And by a show of hands, there, if we had to compare Let's Get Invisible's book versus Catching Cold's episode, which one are you picking? BD, which one are you picking?
Catching cold episode wins this one.
Yeah.
It's a better idea. I mean, it's a better executed idea. It's just really well done. The way they executed the story was really good. Neil Shusterman, I'm gonna say it a million times, dude is a genius, and you can clearly see it from both of these stories. So yeah, Catching Cold, Haunting Hour wins this one.
All right. Micah, you agree?
Yep. Catching Cold episode for me.
All right, Alejandro said he doesn't care, so we'll count that. Either way, the fact that both of his favorites or some of his favorites made it to this point is cool, though. Bruce, I think, said by default would give it to the episode for Catching Cold because he didn't like the book of Let's Get Invisible, so I guess that's there. Spongy likes the episode more than the book, I think. So Catching Cold wins. Haunting Hour beats Goosebumps here. For addiction themed stories, Catching Cold, we say is better than Let's Get Invisible. And it's funny that we brought up a thematic story, and I guess our discussion is just going to be us four tonight about our thoughts on this. Themes in kids horror, right? You know, addiction is one of the many themes that we see. Uh, Common ones you'll see out there is loss of innocence, or be careful what you wish for, or peer pressure. You know, there's common themes you see in kids horror, but when you see a thematic story, because not all of them, I mean, if you're really looking in kids horror, you can always find something that the story has a theme on. But when you see a story like Catching Cult's episode, or Let's Get Invisible, like outright going with a theme and just rolling with it, are is that something that you find good? And if so, which are your favorites? And if you have a least favorite, or find one that's bad, share that too. I'll just leave it up to whoever wants to go first.
I guess I can go. So, in terms of, I guess, my favorite themes in kids horror, this one I think Comp will very much agree with me because I know me and him talk about this theme quite a bit, and me and him agree on it. The idea of becoming more than you are, losing yourself, and then gaining back your identity. That's done in a lot of different stuff. Immediately, I can think of my head, becoming something else that you're not, and then finding yourself. Haunted Mask. Haunted Mask is like one of the most popular themes of this ever, where somebody is uncomfortable with their identity. They want to be known as something more. Carly Beth is an insecure girl. She gets picked on, bullied all the time. She gets this mask who makes her finally confident and scary, but then she loses herself and then she has to find herself. Arguably, this is probably the best kids' horror story to represent that. Another one in Goosebumps is Werewolf Skin. The idea of, losing yourself. Now, that has addiction elements, but at the end of the day, when you put on the skin, lose yourself. You lose yourself to the identity. You become more than what you actually are. And at the end, the people, the characters involved, the parents did have to find themselves. And even Alex found himself in a certain regard, if you analyze his character. So those themes always work out to me. There's probably way more examples that I'm missing because this is a trope that's done a lot in kids horror. And even the ones that are weaker still end up being memorable. And for a theme that I think is a lot of the time bad, corny, and cringy in horror is you can call me the Uncle Ruckus of kids horror in this case. I hate when there's the theme of accepting other races of beings or being inclusive. I don't know what you call that theme, but the theme of accepting beings and things the way they are, it ends up with a lot of cringe a lot of the time. And I have three examples off the top of my head. Accepting people or beings the way they are. We talked about this one, Tale of the Guardian's Curse. The scene at the end of that episode is very much just accepting all races, uniting, and there is the dad uniting with the goddess mummy at the end. And even though it's meant to be wholesome, oh my god, these two different beings are coming together, they're uniting, this is so inclusive and great. It's cringy when you analyze it. Like, yeah, the moral is good, but it just ends up being real cringe. There's a kid's horror book that I read recently that was average, but it was my first graveyard school book. Graveyard School, Little School of Horrors, which deals with potentially a school full of kids that are different monster races. And the ending to that book went from this creepy, intense buildup to just kumbaya. We are all people. Races doesn't matter. We can all accept each other, unite. No, it was corny. One of the corniest Disney approaches you could take. And I'm going to say the last one, the worst offender, is actually from The Haunting Hour. And I hate this episode with the passion. Is it called My Best Friend? The one where a kid takes on a pet zombie? Ew, dude, this
Best friends
episode.
forever.
Yeah, Best Friends Forever. It sucks. It is one of the worst Haunting Hour episodes, one of the worst kids' horror episodes ever. This kid stumbles upon a zombie and takes him in as his best friend and makes him his pet. Like he puts him on a leash and feeds this zombie guy food and hangs out with him and they like learn from each other. And then the ending potentially involves this freaking zombie taking the kid back to meet his family. and making them into a new pet and feeding them like grub worms and dead body parts. It's one of the stupidest, mind numbing things I've ever seen where they tried to play on it where, oh my God, it doesn't matter if this is a reanimated corpse and this is a little kid. They can be best friends. They can get along. They can understand each other. And then they parody it at the end. I hate this theme. It never works for me, and I've never seen a story where it could actually be good. So if one of you out there has a story like this from kids horror that ends up being good, please let me know either in my YouTube or in the comments down below because I hate this theme and I can never get around to it. So those are my picks.
Yeah, I can kind of see it the way you described it, like how annoying that could be if you go through a whole book and then it picks the kumbaya route, be like, hey, can we all get along? We come to read kids horror for the horror, right? And then you know when you get something corny or decom like that, it kind of gets in the way. I think Halloween Town High has a similar ending where like they're like, oh, humans and Halloween Town people can get along. I mean, it's the same idea there, and it's very Disney, and I can see why that would bug you. So yeah, great pick. I guess I'll share mine. I think you already brought it up. Like finding yourself through losing yourself is a great theme that I always gravitate to. Another theme that I think is really good normally, we just talked about it, is addiction. Whether we're talking about technology addiction, like Don't Scream, that's another one of those great allegorical books in Goosebumps I can bring up, like Let's Get Invisible, for example, where the whole book is just rich with thematic messages and things done thematically on purpose to enrich the story. Those are really good normally. I have yet to come across an addiction story in kids horror that did not live up to some sort of hype there. However, there is one theme that I think is absolute cringe almost in everything I've ever seen that has it, and it's puberty. Okay, the puberty allegory stories. I'm looking at you, My Harriet's Adventure, How I Met My Monster, Werewolf's First Night, Afraid of Clowns episode. List goes on with all of you with dealing with coming of age, but not in that coming of age like you're growing more mature and like a How I Learned to Fly way. That's emotional maturity. No, I'm talking about body changes and the themes of feeling different in your body changing and hormones and all that. That's an actual theme for some reason in kids horror, and My Harriet's Adventure is probably the golden example of I just don't like this. And that's probably the biggest example everybody knows of, right, where the whole book that that's a commentary, or not really commentary, but it's definitely an allegory of that. That's why I would say My Harriet's Adventure is also one of the great allegories of Goosebumps, because it's so in your face about it. I don't know. It always comes off cringe, or that's actually the detriment of the story, because who wants to read about that? Nobody. And sometimes it's the recontextualization of it at the end that kind of makes you think that the whole book that you just read is that. Like How I Met My Monster, for example. You don't really see that in the story until the ending recontextualizes that for you, and you can't unsee that. So yeah, not a fan of that. Personally. So I'll pass it over to Alex. Alex, what is your thought about themes? Do you have any good, any bad?
So themes, I really like them when they appear in horror, kids horror specifically, because they can bring up the story and score for me. Some of my highest rated Goosebumps stories, which I'm about to bring two up as examples, have themes. Starting off with my example that everybody's already brought up, Haunted Mask's theme of finding and losing yourself. So I really like how it was done in that book, and there's a lot of copycats of that book, though they don't do it as strong. It is somewhat present. Really like this idea because it kind of ties into accepting yourself. Because usually the character may or may not like themselves, or if they do, they find themselves finding a different route than being good, maybe being very cruel, and them not really liking that, but they can't help it. And that's like stuff you'd find in like Horrors of the Black Ring, and of course the Haunted Mask, both one and two, I think. And yeah, I really like how it is trying to accept yourself and kind of change yourself to someone that you really want to be, but in a good sense. Like you're a terrible person, like you're a straight up a hole. And that's what happens when you put on the haunted mask. And once you actually learn to accept yourself with a symbol of love in the story, you can kind of change yourself as a human to be a better person, as well as accepting your old self as the past and stuff. It has a lot of great messages thrown in that type of story. Another great example of stories that I really like, How I Learned to Fly. This one has a theme of love and what you're willing to do for that. So this kid is falling for a girl this whole book, and he's trying to impress her. And by the end of the book, he realizes he doesn't need to impress her, and it is a really good scene. And I think the final chapter of How I Learned to Fly, sorry for the voice crack, it's pretty much perfect because it summarizes that whole message up pretty well with this kid really doing what he wants to do in his life, and he actually potentially won the girl. Uh, he lost in some ways, but he won in other ways. There's also that there too. So stories like that have this theme of doing what you really want to do and like uh, going in the path that you want to go, and not like in a cruel way, like I want to be an evil villain. I really like that. Now, some examples of stories with a bad theme that I've seen before. Well, this one's exclusively, I've only seen it here, but I'm pretty sure it's probably in others. Might have been even in a, I think, Werewolf in the Living Room, very slightly. And that is a theme from The Tale of the Hunted. Anti-hunting. I'm not going to get too deep on my thoughts on that particularly because I don't want to make this video have a very wild comment section. But I think when it actually comes down to the execution of this idea, it is so dumb and cringy when it comes to kids horror or cringe horror, like I was accidentally saying. Yeah, The Hunted did a terrible job at that, and it really conveyed the message in a very dumb way, like right up in your face. And yeah, from what I've seen for kids horror that does it, it does in a way that I not only disagree with and I think is stupid, it does it in a way that makes hunters and people who have to hunt for food and makes people who just like hunting maybe not as like a sport, maybe just as an activity or something kind of less sporty, like for money or something, like selling taxidermy. It just makes them look like terrible people. Like, okay, it's a weird theme. It's kind of discriminating too. And Revenge Are Us is my next example for the theme of revenge equal bad. No, it does not. I think revenge is completely fine depending on what the scenario is. But Revenge Are Us and a couple other books, I believe, or even a short story, I believe, in one of the triple headers, kind of shows this theme where this maybe character is trying to get revenge, and there's a certain aspect about their revenge that kind of backfires, resulting in revenge equal bad because it's not cool to get revenge on people who are really, really disgusting to you and do not treat you with any respect. It's really evil to do such a thing. That's kind of what Vengerous kind of does towards the end, where it makes the main character kind of have to suffer for getting revenge on this complete unlikable monster of a character, which is the brother. Yeah, it's stupid. So those are some things to really like and really actually hate. But yeah, there's probably not a lot of books for the hate themes, but there's a lot of books for the like themes that I mentioned.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like, I don't really hate much themes because when you see themes or at least strong and pronounced ones, that usually elevates it in some way, unless it gets cringy, right? Or unless it gets that where I just don't agree with it kind of route. And I think we've all kind of touched on that. To round it out, Micah, what is your thoughts on the topic?
It's interesting for me because, like, when I read a book or watch a piece of media, I'm not usually someone who likes to overanalyze things and like pick out themes and stuff. That's just not how I view media. I just more view it from like an entertainment perspective. But there are some themes, mainly negative ones. I can't really think of any positive ones off the top of my head. But some negative ones I brought up were the "be careful what you wish for" kind of story. these are so overdone in so many pieces of kids media. Obviously, this is probably the prime example of it. The title is literally the theme. And I just feel like it's, I don't know, it's just not a very interesting thing because, like, realistically, with these kind of be careful what you wish for stories, like, if these three wishes were granted, like, I feel like it wouldn't be as nitpicky and specific as how they grant things in these kinds of books. Like saying, I wish I was the best person on the basketball team. It's realistically, that's pretty easy to distinguish. Like, okay, you want to be the best player, so I'm going to make you the best player while just you. But the way it does it here is when the wishes go wrong, like a monkey's paw kind of thing. And that's just like, I don't know, it just doesn't really do anything for me. It's just kind of overdone and lame, in my opinion. And the other one isn't necessarily like a theme per se, as it is more of a plot device, as I would say, is like the ones where they have a twist ending that recontextualizes the whole idea of the characters. You know, the this character was actually this the whole time. Prime examples. Welcome to Camp Nightmare and My Harry's Adventure. You know, Welcome to Camp Nightmare. Oh, they were aliens the whole time. Or, oh, they were dogs the whole time. And like, I don't know why. I just think that's such a dumb way of doing it because like, well, I just think it's kind of a dumb way of doing it because like it's just not interesting to me, just of how they I don't know how to word it really, but I just find it kind of stupid because like there's no point in it. Like, especially in Welcome to Camp Nightmare's case, like this twist comes out of nowhere. Like you have like there's no hints towards it whatsoever in the plot. And I feel like it was just Stein's last attempt to like shock you when you read it, in my opinion. And a lot of people kind of agree that the twist is kind of dumb. I will say there are some times where I do think that twist is well done, such as like Ghost Next Door, like recontextualizing that Hannah was a ghost the whole time. In my opinion, that works. I think it's a really well done twist, and it actually is more, it's more well thought out. It's not like a last minute inclusion. It's included like halfway through the book. You realize that. And in my opinion, I just think that works better. Other examples are like Girl Who Cried Monster. I honestly kind of like the twist of Lucy and her parents being monsters, or Shocker on Shock Street. I think the way they did like revealing that the twist ending with Marty and Aaron being robots is really effective in my opinion. So I don't know. That's all I got to say. I really, because again, it's hard for me to really analyze that stuff. It's just not how I analyze media.
Yeah, yeah, and at least with the Welcome to Camp Nightmare thing, it's kind of like My Best Friend's Invisible, and the complaints people have with the ending of that book is that the whole
Mhm.
time you see Sammy, he's like the main character. My Best Friend's Invisible. He's played up like a human character, but mild spoiler alert, like the twist we contextualize is like, oh, he was an alien the whole time, like the main character himself, and you're like, okay, well that makes no sense given the description of his alien form and how this is actually how he looks without anything. I'm like, okay, so how do we overlook this plot detail the whole time? I'm like, it just kind of cheapens the blow, and that's why a lot of people connect that with Welcome to Camp Nightmare, because you don't see that thing coming. It's complete left field, and it's very Twilight Zone esque. Uh, to throw something like a corkscrew at you, and it's supposed to like send you off on a weird note. Um, but yeah, like I can kind of see where you're going with the theme of like it kind of plays on the idea of like um not knowing what you know. I guess that would be a theme of a story, or playing on that idea of like you don't know everything, and you shouldn't expect that to be the case. I think Billy Harlan kind of plays that theme up kind of well in the story too. So um, yeah. Anything else we want to add, BD?
Yeah, I was just gonna say a quick comment. I agree with Micah about the "be careful what you wish for" theme, where it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's gonna be a bad story, but oftentimes when I hear that theme brought up or bring into question, I always roll my eyes just because it's another one of those things where it's gotten so oversaturated to the point and it's so predictable that I just have to cringe. Like one of my favorite movies, this is not a horror movie, but one of my favorite movies that came out recently was Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home, amazing movie. But in the trailer, when Doctor Strange is saying, "Be careful what you wish for, Parker," I rolled my eyes into the back of my skull. I was like, of course that theme has been beat over your head 50 times. The way it's done is well done, but it's just the audacity to always go, be careful what you wish for, be careful what you wish for. And Micah brought up a good point. Every time they do it, it's the most simple wish. It's the most simplest principle. And then they'll twist it. And it's like you expect it coming. It's been overdone ad nauseum. So yeah. I mean, there's still good stories, but I understand his point on it being cringy. I've gotten to that point now.
Yeah, like I would consider like the monkey's paw like a plot structure, but like be careful what you wish for as like a theme, like the moral lesson of it. I think is a little bit. You can look at like catching cold, for example. Be careful what you wish for, right? He doesn't know what he's getting himself into. He wishes that he has success. He wishes that he can catch it, but when he catches it, he's the one that gets caught. He's the actual bait that gets switched. Same thing applies with the episode counterpart with Catching Cold. He wants his ice cream. He wishes everything away so he can have his ice cream, and he gets his wish, and he's petrified of it. So there's different avenues of a be careful what you wish for type of story. I think it depends on the plot structure associated with that, because in certain plot structures it's overdone because it's oversaturated and it becomes annoying, right? A good example, another plot structure that can be annoying but not necessarily a bad theme, would be like you have theme of don't steal, right? But then you get into the typical thing that you see in movies where somebody steals and then they have to go through the punishment or some sort of adversity and learn to apologize. You've seen that so many times in everything that it becomes predictable and it sucks all the fun out of it. You know where the story's
Even
going to
like,
go.
and yeah, like a good example of that would be the red dress from the Haunting Hour. That's a very prime example of that kind of story.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, another example of that.
We need to do
It
that as a
Yeah.
discussion thing. Our favorite and least favorite plot structures.
Oh yeah, plot structures, tropes. You can name it. I mean, we can probably keep this going. But yeah, that's all we have for tonight for you all. Um, I'm gonna put everybody's info in the description and in the comment section as usual. Please go sub up these guys. They're incredible people. Next episode, for episode 17, we are doing board game horror, and we decided we're going to be facing off Goosebumps' The Haunted House game versus an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode called The Tale of the Forever Game. So stay tuned for that next time, y'all. Um, eh, until next time, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please let us know down in the comment section. Did you like Let's Get Invisible more? Did you like Catching Cold more? Whatever version you prefer. And what's your thoughts on the themes? Do you have any good themes you like? Any bad themes? We all want to know. And hope you have a great night and take care, everyone. Bye.
Deuces.